an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Stone Sky, Silvanagist 2, and chapters 9 and 10, The Desert briefly, and You, and Nassun, Through the Fire. In these chapters, we are starting to get some answers here, kids. And frankly, the answers are scarier than the questions. I didn't think that was possible. But the world's a trash fire? That makes sense, right? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. First of all, enormous thanks to Denise for commissioning this episode. Again, Denise has commissioned a voyeur-length hour-and-a-half episode, which, I'm going to need it. So thank you, Denise, because holy shit, the revelations in these 3 chapters, I honestly don't even know where to start because we don't get the full answer yet. We get a lot of the beginnings of the answer. We get a look at the motivation behind the creation of some things that we are now that we have grown familiar with over a couple of books and didn't really understand. So I am personally really excited about that, about starting to be these things starting to be explained. The logistics behind how this stuff happened may never get explained. And in a lot of ways, I just have to be okay with that because that's not what this is about. And it doesn't really matter. But I am deeply curious about some of the other details. So I feel like probably it could be argued that in these chapters, we get the most important pieces of information. But true to form, I am not satisfied yet. I really, really want more. The Silvanagist chapters are turning into like the most compelling shit. And I desperately wanted to keep reading. I decided that, for the remainder of this book, I am going to continue to break it up the way that I have been, where it's the Silvanagist and the 2 chapters from each perspective. And that's going to continue for the next 2 chapters, except that there's a coda at the end, which I'll include in the final episode. But yeah, I am just like, guys, there's so much going on here. So, okay, let's start this off. Silvanagist 2. So all of these stone people are staying in Kalenli's house. And it is a really remarkable chapter. Like, obviously, we get a lot of information about the origin of the Stone Eaters and Kalenli. But more than that, like, there's a subtle thing running through this all, which is just how little the stone people understood who they are to the rest of this city and the way that they have been treated. That is something that I think is really important because it's extremely easy for us on the outside to sort of like look at what's going on with the stone people and kind of be like, you guys, you're really powerful, right? Like, you guys could fuck these people up. Why are you tolerating this treatment? And the truth is, they do not know any better. In the most literal sense, they were programmed, in so many words, not to suggest that they are robots, but they have been programmed the way that people are programmed. They have been socialized. They have been kind of brainwashed to believe that they need to make their oppressors comfortable. And there is a lot here about the ways, and I would also like to mention that I got this backwards. I thought the Stone Eaters were the original. That they, and I mentioned this last episode because it started to hint at that. And that Kalenli was the result of moving away from the kinds of stark, non-human seeming behaviors and in an attempt to make them seem more human and more acceptable. And as it turns out, the opposite is actually true. The Stone Eaters were created via experimentation in an attempt to further other the folks who were born with powers beyond what much of the rest of the earth had. And we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll go further into that, but that is really something. I am kind of astonished at how much that makes sense and yet is the complete opposite of what I thought was going on. It's like it's reverse assimilation in an attempt to demonize an entire segment of the population. And it just honestly is, like I said, it's startling. It took me a second when I started to realize what we were reading, and I had to set the book down and just be like, oh my God, because if there is anything that us human beings love to do, it is to try and set ourselves apart from another group of human beings and be able to draw a distinct line in the sand with black and white sides where there is the good guys and bad guys. And it, like, our shared humanity makes that really difficult. So we just pretend that those people aren't all the way fully human, and that is how we justify it. And it's just amazing to see that there was a concerted effort, like scientifically, to do this, which is in many ways backed up by real life and our history, but it just didn't occur to me. I'm thinking that they want these people to seem more like themselves. It didn't occur to me that they started out just like themselves. So, all right, back to Kalenli's house. There is a lot of creature comfort in this house that makes Hoa realize that the place he has been living is a prison cell. Everything in his room is stark white, is hard, and very sort of, what's the word I want? Spartan, I guess. And her house is, I am assuming that part of the Spartan thing is also an attempt to other them by emphasizing like how little they really need because they are made of stone, kind of. That, they even their living situation can't seem too human. And Kalenli, she is made of flesh, and she has these cushions and beds and blankets and fabrics on the walls and all of this stuff to make it more comfortable. And as they're going through the city, because they're still like, they had gone through the city before this, but the way that Ho is telling the story, we sort of double back in his mind, and he's thinking about on the walk over how somebody tried to touch his hair, which is like an enormous thing in the Black community, is white people treating Black people like pets or animals and like just reaching out to touch them like they have no bodily autonomy. And when a Black person rightfully is like, what the fuck are you doing? Get your hand away from me. White people act offended and like, I'm just trying to understand you, and you should be glad that I'm making the effort. And it's not like they do not understand how incredibly dehumanizing it is. And there's this guy that follows them at one point, and it's mentioned specifically he was older with short gray hair, almost the same texture as ours. And he began to say angry things. And I'm deeply curious if the hair texture, like it sounds like based on what is said to us later, that is an indicator of his own heritage. That's, you know, like he is likely his blood originates from the same group of people, but he is a raging racist and starts shouting like epithets and slurs and we should have wiped you out and your mistakes. I love the we should have wiped you out, which makes no sense because we were very carefully and intentionally made, which, oh boy. He accused us of lying, though none of us spoke to him, and of only pretending to be gone somewhere. He said that his parents and his parents' parents taught him the true horror, the true enemy. Monsters like us were the enemy of all good people, and he was going to make sure we didn't hurt anyone else. And he comes at them, about to assault them, until one of the guards stops him. Kalenli, meanwhile, unfazed, she continues walking like this didn't even happen. And everybody sort of takes their cue from her and also continues on. But it's just like kind of an amazing moment of us seeing for Kalenli just how incredibly predictable this is. And they ask Kalenli later what was wrong with the guy. And I love that they say that what's wrong with him. And she says he's Selangistine, which means basically this dude is just not one of you. And that's it. You can expect this treatment always, every time, which is fucking horrifying. So with every glimpse of normalcy, the city teaches us just how abnormal we are. I have never minded before that we were merely constructs. I have been proud until now of what I am. But now I see the way these normal people look at us and my heart aches. I don't understand why. Perhaps all the walking has damaged me. So then they get to Kalenli's house, which is like, there's this huge garden. Everything is like untidy, but in a way that feels very real and natural. And all of these stone people suddenly let themselves relax and enjoy themselves. And Hoa is thinking to himself, we've always known that the conductors failed to make us emotionless. But I thought us above such intensity of feeling. That's what I get for being arrogant. Now, here we are, lost in sensation and reaction. And I really love that. Like, he has convinced himself that while I do have emotional reactions to things, or while I do feel things, I have pretended not to. And despite knowing that most of it is pretending, I still have managed to even convince myself that I feel things less than the average person. And to suddenly discover that that is not true in any sense, and that you are just as susceptible as any other person, is both humbling and, I would imagine, a little frightening. You know, emotion can be a difficulty. It can be a hindrance, and so can logic. Each of them can be. So then we get the moment where Hoa is sort of watching Kalenli and thinking that what he feels is love. And he doesn't, like, he's aware in a weird way that it's likely not, but is still sort of, he doesn't have another word for it, you know? So he watches her get up and go inside. And everybody goes in with her, and they have their first moment of kind of privacy since she has come to speak to them. Because, like, the guards are still there, but they are outside. They are watching to make sure that nobody comes in, that these people are kept safe from outsiders. They do not, I don't think, it doesn't occur to them that they're going to be having a conversation about their origin. So Kalenli talks about growing up with Conductor Galat. I I was raised alongside him, the experiment to his control. He's ordinary except for a drop of undesirable ancestry. I blink my ice-white eyes, and I think of Gallets, and suddenly I understand many new things. Now, I should mention that Shafa's been described as having ice-white eyes. So, is Shafa of this same ancestry? I think so, right? Are all guardians? Or is Shafa are guardians just picked out of the population at large and Shafa just happens to be? I don't remember if all guardians are described as looking really similar or not. I've lost track of that. Galat's parents, who at first I thought were my parents, didn't tell me what I was. I went to school, played games, did all the things a normal Selangistine girl does while growing up. But they didn't treat me the same. For a long time, I thought it was something I'd done. I wondered why I was so horrible that even my parents couldn't seem to love me. And that just kills me to read. She doesn't. Why would she know? Why did they deceive you? Gewa asks. The experiment was to see if I could be human. To see if, raised among decent, natural folk, I might turn out at least decent, if not natural. And so my every achievement was counted as a Selangistine success. Selangistine? I'm not sure if I'm saying this right. While my every failure or display of poor behavior was seen as proof of genetic degeneracy. Which, oh damn, that fucking tracks, man. It's just, it's respectability politics on steroids. It's and coming from your oppressors. I mean, Jesus Christ. So they ask why she would be indecent, and she takes a moment and looks at them thinking, God knows what, until she finally says, you don't know anything, do you? And it's clear that she expected them to be a little bit more up on their own history and origin than they are. And it's mentioned that her house is almost definitely bugged. But Kalenli seems to not care about that, which I think is pretty significant, because if it's bugged and she doesn't care, she either thinks the story is it's not going to be considered a secret enough to punish her for it, or that whatever the consequences are, they will not be able to act on it before whatever her next step in her plan is, because I have no doubt that she has a plan. Or she thinks it's just being recorded for listening later, but not being monitored live. So it continues on in another section that is still told from Hoa's perspective, starting out with, remember what I have told you. And we get a little bit of a geography lesson about the way that all of this has been set up. One of these groups was the Thnyes. I hope I'm saying that right, but it probably doesn't matter. It was hard to say their name with the proper pronunciation, so Selenagistines called them Nyest. Yes, the two words did not mean the same thing, but the latter is what caught on. Which, that also, just being oh, I can't pronounce it, so I'm just going to change your whole name and the meaning behind what you are, which is exactly the kind of shit that colonizers do. The Selanagistines took their land. The Nyes fought, but then responded like any living thing under threat. With diaspora, sending whatever was left of themselves flying forth to take root and perhaps survive where it could. The descendants of these Nyes became part of every land, every people, blending in among the rest and adapting to local customs. They managed to keep a hold of who they were, though, continuing to speak their own language even as they grew fluent in other tongues. They maintained some of their old ways, too, like splitting their tongues with salt acid for reasons known only to them. And while they lost much of the distinctive look that came of isolation within their small land, many retained enough of it that to this day ice-white eyes and ash-blow hair carry a certain stigma. Yes, you see now. But the thing that made the Nyes truly different was their magic. Magic is everywhere in the world. Everyone sees it, feels it, flows with it. In Sil'anagist, magic is cultivated in every flower bed and tree line and grapevine-draped wall. Each household or business must produce its share, which is then funneled away in gen-engineered vines and pumps to become the power source for a global civilization. It is illegal to kill in Sil'anagist because life is a valuable resource. The Nyes did not believe this. Magic could not be owned, they insisted, any more than life could be, and thus they wasted both by building, among many other things, plutonic engines that did nothing. They were just pretty, or thought-provoking, or crafted for the sheer joy of crafting. And yet this art ran more efficiently and powerfully than anything the Sil'anagistine had ever managed. So, they were different, and that starts things off. But it's noted differences alone are never enough to cause problems. The Sil'anagists, they are assimilating the world, essentially. All cities, all languages had become I'm just going to say Sil'anagistine, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And then here comes this quote that's been highlighted 2,000 times, and which I definitely highlighted and sent to Rashawn via text. But there are none so frightened or so strange in their fear as conquerors. They conjure phantoms endlessly, terrified that their victims will someday do back what was done to them, even if, in truth, their victims couldn't care less about such pettiness and have moved on. Conquerors live in dread of the day when they are shown to be not superior, but simply lucky. So when Nyes magic proved more efficient than Sil'anagistine, even though the Nyes did not use it as a weapon, this is what Kalenli told us. Perhaps it began with whispers that white Nyes irises gave them poor eyesight and perverse inclinations, that split Nyes tongues could not speak the truth. That sort of sneering happens, cultural bullying, but things got worse. It became easy for scholars to build reputations and careers around the notion that Nyes Sesepine were fundamentally different, more sensitive, more active, less controlled, less civilized, and that this was the source of their magical peculiarity. This is what made them not the same kind of human as everyone else. Eventually, not as human as everyone else. Finally, not human at all. So what happens is all of these scientists began to basically study and analyze the Sesepine of the Nyes, and they realize that their assertions about them being totally different are incorrect. And that frustrates the hell out of them, because they don't know how to continue treating them differently, like they're less than human, if they don't have any actual scientific data to back it up. They were trying to use science to support their claim, and it's turning out to be incorrect. And so they decide to create the evidence to support their claim. The carefully engineered and denatured remnants of the Nyes have Sesepine far more complex than those of ordinary people. Kalenli was made first, but she wasn't different enough. Remember, we must not just be tools, but myths. Thus, we later creations have been given exaggerated Nyes features. Broad faces, small mouths, skin nearly devoid of color, hair that laughs at fine combs, and we're all so short. They've stripped our limbic systems of neurochemicals and our lives of experience and language and knowledge, and only now, when we have been made over in the image of their own fear, are they satisfied. They tell themselves that in us they've captured the quintessence and power of who the Nyes really were, and they congratulate themselves on having made their old enemies useful at last. But we are not the Nyes. We aren't even the glorious symbols of intellectual achievement that I believed we were. Sil Anagist is built on delusions, and we are the product of lies. They have no idea what we really are. And everybody, as they're listening to this, is just like kind of blown away. They don't really know how to react to this, which just makes total sense. She tells them that they're going to stay in her house overnight, and that's like extremely exciting for a lot of them, but they are also nervous about it and they have some anxiety. And Kalenli speaks alone with Hoa, and he asks, like, why do you tell us all of this stuff? And she says basically that the Nyes used to have a person who was in charge of telling the truth. That was like a job. And that she is going to be like carry on that tradition. And Hoa is a little bit angry. I mean, understandably, and he's like having trouble knowing where to direct this anger because he knows it's not really her fault that like this stuff is such a revelation and that he didn't know it. But he can blame her for being the one to tell them when it feels like at this point it doesn't matter. Knowing doesn't do them any good in his eyes. And she says basically that's like you would be making a choice based on false or no information. And I am trying to give you the information so that you can decide whether or not you want to continue to remember them or not. And Hoa says that, you know, he kind of just doesn't want to be informed. Like, there is no way to, like, unknow the thing that she has told them. And she says you want to be strong enough to hold the onyx. And Hoa is just sort of like, well, at this point, like, this was supposed to be something that we were all aiming for because we were useful and helpful and doing our city proud. But now this doesn't hold the meaning for me that it did. I don't want to do that now. And she says, does the plutonic engine work? Dear Sesapine, you aren't what they made you to be. Does that negate what you are? I am powerful in ways they did not expect. They made me, but they do not control me, not fully. This is why I have emotions, though they tried to take them away. This is why we have Earth Talk and perhaps other gifts that our conductors don't know about. And she talks about the Nyes Lorists and that they were storytellers and warriors and nobility. I feel like I've earned the right to claim some part of their mantle. To master the onyx, you need to understand the Nyes. What the conductors don't realize is that it responds best to a certain emotional resonance. Everything I'm telling you should help. And I can't help but think that there is some symbolism here to the fact that it's like the black stone. And some of the emotional resonance that she is sharing here is about getting in touch with their own history and what has really been done to them. I feel like that, you know, is very meaningful. So what happened to the Nyes? You'll find out tomorrow, she says. We're going to see them. To their graves? Life is sacred in Sil Anagist. Don't you know that? And then she is gone. It is an answer that I feel I should understand, but in my own way, I am still innocent. Kalenli is kind. She lets me keep that innocence for the rest of the night. So, I have a bad feeling about this, kids. I am expecting a work camp. At the best, maybe a ghetto. Or at the very worst, nodes again. And I am not excited about this. Not at all, kids. So at the end of this, we get another, little, what's the word I want? A little entry into a history, like a journal or something again. And it's somebody who is frustrated because it looks like their funding is going to be pulled. And they have just started to put together the pattern of what's happening with the levels and the seasons. These things aren't happening every 200 or 300 years. It's more like every 30 or 40. If not for Ragos, we'd be 1,000 times dead. And with these dates and the others I've compiled, I'm trying to put together a predictive model for the more intensive seasons. There's a cycle here, a rhythm. Don't we need to know in advance if the next season is going to be longer or worse somehow? How can we prepare for the future if we won't acknowledge the past? Which, that is basically my view of things. But apparently, when you are a conqueror, you just love to accept the results of having conquered a people without acknowledging the facts of how you accomplish that. So we love to forget. It's our favorite. It's our favorite thing. So let's go to chapter 9, the desert briefly, and you. So our whole team with Essun is getting ready to head into the desert. And the thing about this is that they know this is going to be really bad. Like, they're going into this aware of the fact that they are going to lose people and that there is going to be a kind of hardship faced on this trail that they have not come across yet. They have managed to avoid. The danger of deserts during a season is simply that nearly all animals and insects there hibernate deep under the sand where it's still warm. There are those who claim to have figured out a surefire method of digging up sleeping lizards and such, but those are usually scams. The few calms that edge the desert guard such secrets jealously. The surface plants will have already shriveled away or been eaten by creatures preparing for hibernation, leaving nothing above ground but sand and ash. Stonelore's advice on entering deserts during seasons is simply don't, unless you mean to starve. So they spend a couple of days at the edge of the desert just prepping their food and making sure to have as much, like, they're not taking stuff that can go bad. Anything that can be cooked and dried and salted, that is what they are doing. And there's a weirdness to it for Essun because she knows that people are going to die, but she also knows that Hoa is going to be with her and that Hoa can just pull her to the other side of the earth anytime he gets the chance to get her out of there. But I do wonder if Hoa can just bail anytime. Why Hoa's not bouncing and getting them some fucking food? Because that feels like something that could be helpful. Like, go somewhere and just grab a pig. Come back. I don't know. Even some fucking boil bugs. They don't hurt you, right? Kill them. They could just eat those. There's plenty of those where they came back from. Like, I feel like Hoa could do more. And I don't know if there is a reason that he doesn't, or that Essun doesn't think of asking him to. Like, maybe she doesn't want to underline just how strange he is by having him do things like that. Maybe he can't bring stuff back with him. But it seems like he travels with her to the other side, and she's wearing clothing, and she comes out on the other side, and her clothing isn't damaged or anything. It's not like that stuff burns up when traveling through the center of the earth. So I feel that Hoa could probably protect things that he was carrying and bring them back. And honestly, I kind of expected that to be a thing that wound up happening, and it doesn't. And I was surprised by that. I don't know if anybody else, like, you know, if that occurred to anyone, but it's sort of weird to mention that Hoa can, like, just get her the hell out of there and then not have Hoa do anything to travel quickly to help. I just expected that since it was mentioned specifically before the journey began, that it was going to come up as like a plot point, and it doesn't. And Hoa, as he's watching them get ready, is talking about Essun and saying that because she feels responsible for what went down with Kastrima, she will definitely not be accepting help if she doesn't have to. Like, as far as she is concerned, the suffering that she's going to endure by going through this with everybody is like her penance and atonement for what she did. So Tonki oversees a quick and dirty breakdown and rebuilding of the storage wagons to a new, lighter, more shock-resistant design that should pull more easily over desert sand. I really like this aspect of things, you know, like everybody is trying to do what they can. And everybody is trying to prepare rather than rushing into this journey in an effort to kind of just get it over with. They are facing this the way that they should, which is like, they're treating it almost like a sea voyage, you know, and they're just, we need to be ready for as much as we can be. And there is a woman who sits down with Essun here, and Essun really does not want to talk to anybody. It's kind of amusing to read from her perspective and see how she's just like not interested in having this conversation, and how like kind of resentful she is at the fact that this person has come to not only talk with her, but to assess how many rings she got at the fulcrum and low-key accuse her of being the one that started this season. And she says that people are saying a 10-ring raga broke the world. And Essun corrects her and says orogene. And Daniel isn't prepared to be corrected in this way. And it's like, what? And she says orogene. Let's see. It means some... Oh, that's right, because I forgot. Ika is encouraging the use of the word raga for a caste name, and all the stills are tossing the word around like it doesn't mean anything. It's not petty. It means something. So this is interesting. I am curious about Ika's perspective in creating a caste name from it, because I feel like that is her attempt to kind of reclaim it in a way, but then you wind up with this sort of thing where people just use it like it doesn't mean anything when it's been a slur. And, you know, there's a temptation to sort of like compare it to the word being used, you know, how there's like the N word and then there's like the softened A version of it that is thrown around in music and, you know, amongst members of that community, and how it has sort of made white people feel like it's something that they can also use. But I don't feel like it quite compares, because even in music and conversation, that is not the same thing as it. Like a caste name is sort of like a sanctioned, almost I want to say like a government official use. And that is not really the same thing. And I'm surprised at it. I'm curious about Ika's thinking there. Why wouldn't she just say orogene is a caste name? Is she trying to like undermine the fact that they are already called that? I don't know. But she says, you don't get to say raga. You haven't earned that. All right. Daniel says then, with no hint of either apology or humoring you. She just accepts the new rule. She also doesn't insinuate again that you're the person who caused the rifting. They say that you know how to end the season, that you're going to be leaving soon to go somewhere and actually try, and that you'll need people to go with you when you do. Are you volunteering? Maybe. You just got accepted into the Strongbacks. I'm Lorist cast, actually. Daniel Lorist Renanist once. Daniel's Strongback Kastrima's never going to sound right. So she says soldiers might get a calm through a season, but storytellers are what kept Sansa going through 7 of them. And she gets kind of defensive about the fact that, you know, there's a lot of talk about how Lorists are trained to be like soldiers. Sometimes those of us who came out of the old Loras families train in hand to hand the arts of war and so forth. It makes us more useful during seasons. But she's trying to she's basically saying, I think, yeah, I could be a soldier, but like what I'm guarding is so valuable that I fall kind of outside of that. And I think that she basically is low-key, and I feel like this is going to come out sounding like I'm really throwing shade at her, and I don't mean to, but she kind of comes across as saying I'm more important than just a soldier. And I can't decide if I'm like misreading that or what. Better to be a general than cannon fodder, since that was the only choice I was given. But I've tried not to forget who I really am. And she talks here about the fact that she has lost track of what some of the tablets say. And I really like that because she is startled at how quickly she's losing her knowledge and, you know, is sort of trying to emphasize how easy it is to lose this stuff and how quickly it happens. And that seems like something that would definitely, I mean, when you are like, let's just think about the math that we used to know 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and what we remember of it now, because for whatever reason, we don't use it every day. And when you are not only not using it every day, but your focus turns from academic pursuits entirely to just surviving, yeah, I guess you wouldn't focus on that. I guess you would lose some of your tales and your lore. So she says, I know when I see new stories being written, though. And bless her, Essun is just like, what are you talking about? And Daniel's like, girl, you're the hero of the story. I guess it makes sense that you don't fucking realize what's happening. And Essun can't help but like laugh at her. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not a hero. Like, I have killed a lot of people. I have brought down my entire hometown. I broke Alia in pieces. My daughter does not want to come near me. And frankly, I am afeared of what I've made her into and don't want to go near her. I am sure not a hero. But I can't help but think, when you look at heroes' tales, so much of the time, we will just see somebody as a hero en toto, but we don't really want to look at the individual things that they did to get where they got. And frequently heroes are gross, terrible people. Like, guys, let's talk about, like, you know, Ulysses, right? Odysseus. This motherfucker was out here breaking deals, cheating on his wife, lying to his men, putting like people in danger because of his own pride. He was not great, but he is just hailed as this hero. And honestly, it's as soon as like really fitting into that. I mean, heroes are people who get put in impossible situations and are forced to make decisions that we never want to have to worry about making, right? I just think that Essun is really underestimating how trash many heroes are. That's all I'm saying. So she kind of argues with this woman for a minute and is just like, I don't trust you. And Daniel's like, I don't care if you trust me. I don't trust you either. We don't have to like each other in order to work together. And she says, it's not like I have a reason to kill you this time. And it's worse that Daniel has said this, that she remembers sicking a shirtless guardian on you and is unapologetic about it. Yes, it was war, and yes, you later slaughtered her army, but... And this causes Essun to basically yell, people like you don't need a reason. And Daniel says, I don't think you have any real idea who or what people like me are. But if you need more reasons, here's another. Renanis is shit. Sure, there's food, water, and shelter. Your head woman's right to lead you there if it's true the city is empty now. Better than calmless or rebuilding somewhere with no store caches. But shit otherwise. I'd rather stay on the move. Bullshit, you say, frowning. No calm is that bad. Daniel just lets out a single bitter snort. It makes you uneasy. Ooh, the tea. What the fuck does that mean? I am dying to know. I guess it makes sense now that Renanis was out here trying to, conquer neighboring comms, right? Okay, now I get it. But also, what? What has gone so wrong? That this is what I'm dying to know. Dying to know. What does that mean? How shit can it be if it's got food and water and shelter? I mean, does it just not have any walls left? Is it infested with something? Is there... I just don't know what that could mean. So then we jump, there's a break here, and we jump to, and this is so funny, Essun having a conversation with Lerna after having sex with him. And it's mentioned that this is an anticlimactic thing now that it has finally happened. What you feel for Lerna will never be intense or guilt-free. And apparently how this started was him being curious about the fact that her breast had been removed because of it turning into stone, and asking if he could see the site where it had happened. And there's the scab, and he is looking at you and he says, "You're still beautiful." And she sort of has this reaction to that she didn't expect to have, which that is really true. There are times where somebody will say something to you, and it's not until they've said it that you really realize that's really what you needed to hear. You didn't know that you were worried about it even, but then when somebody points it out and is like, oh yeah, I'm going to say this to you, you get so floored at how either they got right to the heart of something that you needed to hear and how beautiful that is. Or there are times where I get suspicious and I'm like, somehow they knew that I needed to hear that, and they knew better than I did. And they're telling me what they think I need to hear. And there are times where that's not even a bad thing. It can, you can easily read that as just being manipulative, but I don't feel like that it's that simple a lot of the time. But it's just really kind of there's a feeling when that happens of being almost ashamed a little bit at how little you know yourself, that you didn't realize this was preying on your mind. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's something about this that felt really, really true to me. And Lerna is saying that he told Daniel that she should come with them. And it takes a second before Essun realizes that what he's saying is, oh, I'm definitely coming with you. And also, I think this person should too. And she's just like, wait, us? And then just sort of is like, ah, shit, because she knows it's too late. Like, they're involved. Of course he's coming with her. There comes a time of greater hardship for you. All seasons are hardship. This is personal. This is 1,000 people trying to cross a desert that is deadly even when acid rain isn't sheeting from the sky. This is a group force march along a high road that is shaky and full of holes big enough to drop a house through. High roads are built to withstand shakes, but there's a limit, and the rifting definitely surpassed it. So we get here a brutal account of just what this journey is like. And it's really kind of a mercy. Like, there's a point at which, because again, remember, this is all being told like from Hoa's perspective, looking in on the outside. Hoa at one point, it seems like, is recounting this for an Essun that does not fully remember. And he says something about how he doesn't want to tell her all the details because there's really no need to know it. So he is cutting things short and just giving her sort of the highlights so that she can get a vague understanding of what it was that she went through without having to suffer mentally all over again. So the acid rain is not as bad as it could be. It's mentioned that it's very, very diluted and more like vinegar. But there have been times where the acid rain would strip animals' fur and peel the skins off oranges, which, yuck, Christ's sake. Ika is basically setting the pace to a speed that is almost impossible. It's described as a brutal pace. And guys, this is the kind of thing where even just thinking about it makes me so anxious. I am one of the slowest people you'll ever meet. And this is not to say that I'm like out of shape, because while I am heavy, I'm actually in pretty good shape. Like, I can, keep up in Zumba classes better than a lot of the thinner people. And I do weightlifting and can lift more than a lot of the people who look like they're in better shape around me. I've got good muscle. I've got good lungs. I have asthma in the cold, but that's a whole other thing. And yet I have very short legs. I have a long torso and unusually short arms and legs. I will be like the one person in a yoga class who, when seated with their legs crossed, in like a lotus position, people will put their hands flat on the floor beside them to sort of try and lift themselves off the floor for a certain pose. My hands do not even touch the floor. They are like 2 inches short of even being able to reach the floor. When I am in a setting of having to keep up with a group of people, either hiking or walking, I literally never can. I have to take 2 steps for a normal person's 1 step, which means that my pace is a speed walk bordering on a jog in order to be at the same pace as people walking. And I have encountered this so many times, and it took me so long to really understand, because I would match people's rhythm and think that was enough. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And I'd really think that if I matched their rhythm, then we would have to be walking at the same pace. But my paces were like, a half a foot shorter than theirs. And that adds up really quickly. So I'm reading this in this, pace that Ika sets, which is fast for an average person. And I absolutely know I would die. I would have been left behind by myself. And maybe I would eventually catch up by the end of the day. I might not fall so far behind that, I wouldn't ever catch up with them again. But things seem to be, I mean, I say, Tony's here, you would have been dead on the first day. The one thing I can say is that my body loves to store fat. So I could probably make it longer because of like the endurance factor. So in that sense, I might be all right. But it just, reading about the pace that she's setting really did give me like genuine anxiety. I was just thinking about how like this would be so difficult for me. I have done like 5Ks before and literally been the last person to cross the finish line. And when I left, I was with the crowd. I was doing the same walking pace because I was doing a walk, like a fast walk, and it didn't matter. So people talk about like, oh, I'll do this race and at least if I don't come in last, I'll be happy. And I'm like, if I come in last, I'm not mad. That's just how it is. Like I just have sort of accepted that. So they set this pace and people are twisting their ankles. People are having breathing problems. There are all kinds of like, injuries that come up when you are walking in an area that is as dangerous as this. The holes in the road, the falls, the areas where you can just like, misstep. And Lerna is talking to Essun and says, I have to tell Ika we can't keep going at this pace. We'll start losing people if we don't. And Essun interrupts and just says, she knows. You've spoken as gently as you can, but it still silences him. He stares until you lie back down beside him. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelms anguish, and he sleeps. And so Essun goes and is with Ika the next day as they're walking and notices that like her feet are covered in blood because she's got all of these blisters and she has not gotten new boots. If your feet rot off, you begin, but she rolls her eyes and points toward the supply pile in the middle of the camp. And she, like, as soon realizes that they do not have enough food for everyone. They just don't. The best that she can do, she being Ika, is get some extra socks to sort of shield her feet. But essentially what Ika is saying is like, yeah, if my feet rot off, I guess that's one less person to feed, I believe, is her point there. Or just, hey, this is the least of our worries. Like, we might not even make it. I'm not really going to be that worked up about this. It shocks you that you're doing as well as you are. You're not healthy, not exactly. Your menstrual cycle has stopped. You notice your ribs show starkly beneath loose skin. That's only partly because of all the walking, though. Some of it is because you keep forgetting to eat. You feel tired at the end of the day, but it's a distant, detached sort of thing. You feel as though you're floating above yourself, watching him sigh, listening to someone else yawn, like it's happening to someone else. And she realizes that this is what started to happen to Alabaster, that he was becoming detached from his own body. And she gets a little panicky and decides that she's going to make an effort to like eat whenever she can to try and keep connected. Now, again, I am not so sure that this is a bad thing. We saw Alabaster for a second, if I'm not mistaken, as a stone person. Am I wrong? I feel like this was a thing that happened. And I can't help but wonder if she isn't like eventually going to head in that same direction, and maybe that will be better and easier for her, and that's part of what's happening here. But the thing that's so weird is, how can that be when the stone people were like engineered? How can that happen? Is that the magic that does it? I'm so confused about it. So they are, they finally get to the end of the high road and they have to walk on sand. And in some ways that's better because the roads were very dangerous. And so they don't have to worry about suddenly falling through a hole. On the other hand, sand is difficult to walk on. And those of you who have walked on the beach know. You stick to the areas of the beach where the water hits because that keeps it packed and firm. But when you're trying to walk through the loose sand, I mean, forget it. It is so tiring. That's why people often will train, if they're runners, they will train running on sand. Because that way, once they actually are on asphalt to run, it feels like a fucking breeze. McSeeks earns his keep by drawing enough of the moisture out of the topmost layer of sand and ash and icing it a few inches down to firm it up beneath everyone's feet. It exhausts him to do this on a constant basis, though, so he saves it for the worst patches. And he tries to teach somebody else to do it, but they aren't able to. And Essun thinks that she could have done it once, but she can't anymore. And again, I didn't realize that she just straight up doesn't think she can use her orogeny at all anymore. I am fascinated by this. Like, I really thought that if she used it, but she kept it out of the, like, realm of using the, what do you call it? Obelisks, or try to do smaller things that are akin to things that she was taught at the fulcrum, she would be okay. But evidently, she really thinks that there is no way to do it at all without falling into the type of magic that summons this transformation. So, Tony says, we saw what seemed to her as an alabaster face that looked like alabaster, so yes. Yeah, that's what I thought. And so I feel like alabaster is somehow still alive. Like, his transformation into stone, he's eaten by the stone woman, but it's almost like she then gives birth to him. Like, consuming him didn't actually transmute the stone he was made out of into food for her and fuel for her. It's like she was saving the pieces for later to assemble him once he eventually completely turned. But at the same time, she had seemed kind of mad at Essun after what Essun did, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But yeah, I'm curious if this is like as bad as she thinks. Like, of course, turning, like, pieces of you turning to stone, her reacting the way she does makes sense. I'm not trying to act like, why are you getting so upset about this? You just lost an arm. You just lost a tit. Like, no, I get it. But I just sort of wonder if this isn't like leading towards something that she just doesn't understand, but would actually be better for her in the end. Meanwhile, Lerna is kind of like chilling out on going and helping people at all anymore, unless they specifically ask for him, because it's becoming more and more clear there's really not a whole lot that Lerna can even do for anybody. They're just too far into this now, and he doesn't have the supplies, and it's not great. So finally, one of the women, she sits down. Her name is Ontrag, and she's a potter. She sits down and says she doesn't feel like going any further. And Ika stands and argues with her. And this surprises Essun, because she's like, Ika knows better than to what? But Ika is, Ontrag like means something specific to her. Ontrag is like a symbol a little bit of the people who matter outside of their productivity. And, you know, she used to teach me in creche. She used to know stories. There's more to being Kastrima than being rusting useful, which I really enjoy this, that Ika is like, we can't be like capitalists. That can't be all that matters. But at this point in time, it is right now, which sucks. It does. And poor Ika, you know, she's trying to be a good leader, and she is being a good leader. She is strong, but she's not a fucking robot. So eventually they reach the end. And as they do, they lose a lot of people. There had been like a little bit over 1,100. And by the time they come out on the other side, there is just over 800. So they lost 300 so people. And it is an ugly scene. Those who come out on the other side, they manage to come out of it, but they are starving to death. Like, it is not a good look. And once they finally come out on the other side, they come across this farm and they manage to uncover some like private caches of cornmeal that were sealed in urns under the house. And they make some stuff. And I should mention too that before they set out, like when they're getting ready to leave, there is a mention of Essun like eating this stew that's got a lot of fat and meat in it because they all have to put on as much weight as they can before they head across the desert, and that she's trying not to think about the meat, but that it's very plentiful since the attack. So obviously they are eating the bodies of the people who tried to come at them. And grim. Like, honestly, I am such a practical person that as much as cannibalism is a horrifying prospect in theory, I don't feel like it would fuck me up as bad as it might a lot of other people, because I would just be like, it's just meat. Like, they're not using it anymore. They're not people anymore. What are you going to do? They also wanted to kill us. It's fine. But, you know, it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to put it in your mouth and chew and swallow. So she is eating it and being like, God damn, this is good though, because not only is it that stew, but they made like cornbread that's actually like sweetened, and that's the first like really great food they've had in a minute. And I gotta tell you, reading about this woman eating a bunch of cornbread and stew, I was like, oh damn, I need to go make myself something to eat. This sounds really good. So I could have taken you from the desert. You did not have to suffer as they did, and yet they have become part of you, the people of this calm. Your friends, your fellows. You needed to see them through. Suffering is your healing, at least for now. And then we get a bunch of like little details of things Hoa did along the way that helped them to make it. That he kept animals away that were like hibernating under the sand, but would have attacked the humans and eaten them if they could. That he helped transform the wooden axles of one of the wagons that began to sort of break down. That he moved the carpet because he sensed that there was cornmeal underneath the floorboards. And so he moved the carpet so they would see the trap door leading to it. And he even turned back around to Ontrag, and it says, tuned away what little pain she felt. She was not alone at the end. Does any of this comfort you? I hope so. I'm still human, I told you. Your opinion matters to me. I loved that. I just find this really like... Kastrima survives. That is also what matters. You survive. For now, at least. And at last, some while later, you reach the southernmost edge of Renanis' territory. So, then we go to Chapter 10, Nassun Through the Fire. This is bonkers. So they're inside, basically, like is like a really awesome subway car. Guys, this is so... Tony said barn owls. Barn owls will be something that you understand if you listen to the Song of Ice and Fire episodes, and if not, there's no explaining it. So they're inside this vehicle, and there is a voice that's speaking, the kind of mind the gap, please, sort of detached voice. But it becomes pretty clear as things continue that this voice is not an automated thing. It's automated to a point, but it definitely can like respond, hear you, change languages. Like, this shit is a whole other thing. And Shafa is having a vibe here that something about this is not okay. First of all, he's in more pain here than he has been in a minute. Like, the further down they go, it's obvious that the stone in him and the silver is fucking with him much worse. When this announcer starts speaking in this other language, he can kind of remember the language. And he mentions that it will depart from the city and begin the transit to Core Point in 2 minutes to arrive in 6 hours. There was something about other vehicles, other routes, return trips to various nodes. I don't remember what that means. And I'm like, oh shit. I remember what nodes have meant. I hope I'm wrong about this. I guess we'll see. So she sits down and is trying to get comfortable while Shafa just sort of paces around and mutters to himself about how this shit is fucking familiar, that he knows that there's something, and he says familiarity, but no context, no meaning. Something is about this journey is wrong, and I don't remember what. And now I'm like, is Shafa one of the OGs that we were like seeing described? Like, Hoa is telling us the story from the beginning, but we just see Hoa now just like, you know, a stone person just out here walking around being a weirdo. Were they being created to be guardians? Is that what they were supposed to be? Is Hoa part of the same sort of family as Shafa? Is that because I thought guardians looked human, so I don't think so, because like we had Essun last chapters being able to pretend to be a guardian, so I don't think that's what it is. But there's something about Shafa saying no context that reminded me of the way that Kalenli was talking about how all of the stone people needed more context when she took them outside. So I don't know, it might just be a whole other deal. So Shafa has been damaged for as long as Nassun has known him, but this is the first time he has seemed damaged to her. There is an oddness to the way his eyes dart around the vehicle interior that makes Nassun suspect he's seeing things that aren't there. So she kind of gestures for him to come in and sit and sleep. And he realizes what he's doing and that he's kind of freaking her out. And he's like, okay, sorry. And he comes to sit down. And he says that the vehicle is announcing that they're approaching the transition point, and it asks if we would like to see something. And there is this moment where Nassun asks if it will hurt. And the vehicle tells her no. Now, it's not lying to her, because it doesn't hurt her exactly. I mean, it kind of winds up that it does. But for poor Shafa, and I never thought I'd say the words poor Shafa, but here we are, it does hurt. It is basically more than his body can bear, which guardians can tolerate a lot. So obviously this is some shit. Biomajestic storage surpluses permit, and then there's like something that's out of the language and then comes back with processing. It continues. Translation, something. Linguistic drift. How do I answer what it was asking before? How do I tell it that I want to see what it's talking about? And the vehicle hears her and just begins to open its windows. Not the actual windows. There's a nice breeze. But it begins to open like the shields over the windows so that the light comes inside. And this is when Nassun sees the center of the earth, basically. She is not ready. Because as it turns out, this center of the earth is fucking alive. And it is pissed. Oh my goodness. It is really fucking done with the human race. As far as it is concerned, every human being can go to hell because they have essentially stolen magic from it by invading and violating it, and not even recognizing while doing so that it is a sentient, conscious being. So what we're saying here is that the concept of Father Earth is true in a much more literal sense than I ever thought. It's interesting that it's Father Earth rather than Mother Earth. I'm not really sure why that is the way it's said here. But yeah, this is just so, as she is experiencing this, she looks over and sees that Shafa has a weird smile on his face that's different than usual. The leadership families of Yemenis believed that orogenes once ruled the world, that their duty was to keep your kind from ever regaining that much power, that you would be monstrous rulers of the world, doing back to ordinary folk what had been done to you if you ever got the chance. I don't think they were right about any of it, and yet look at you, little one. If you are the monsters they imagined you to be, you are also glorious. When she gets close, she sees how much strain he is under. He has plastered a smile on his face, more of a rictus, as he prowls restlessly back and forth, but Nassun can tell the smile endorphins are doing nothing. Why did the lines get brighter? She tries to examine herself. Nothing of her silver is different. It flows in its usual clearly delineated lines. She turns her silver gaze on Shafa and then belatedly notices something stunning. The vehicle is made of silver, and not just fine lines of it. It is surrounded by silver, permeated with it. What she perceives is a wave of the stuff, rippling in ribbons around herself and Shafa, starting at the nose of the vehicle and enclosing them behind. This sheath of magic, she understands suddenly, is what's pushing away the heat and pushing back on the pressure and tilting the lines of force within the vehicle so that gravity pulls towards its floor and not towards the center of the earth. The walls are only a framework. There's something beyond the miracle, something outside. And what flows between her own cells is a single thread. And yet this is titanic, curling away between a soft whirl of hot rock and a high-pressure bubble of searing water. A single thread of silver, and it is longer than the tunnel they have traversed so far. She can't find either of its ends. It's wider than the vehicle's circumference, and then some. Yet otherwise, it's just as clear and focused as any of the lines within Nassun herself. The same, just immense. And then Nassun understands. She understands so suddenly and devastatingly that her eyes snap open, and she stumbles backward with the force of the realization. The silver within his body is so bright that when it flares, he doubles over, clutching at his head and groaning. He is in too much pain to fulfill his duty as a guardian or to act on his concern for her because the silver in his body has grown to be as bright as that immense thread out in the magma. Oh, guys, this is so crazy. The silver deep within Father Earth wends between the mountainous fragments of his substance in exactly the same way that they twine among the cells of a living, breathing thing. And that is because a planet is a living, breathing thing. She knows this now with the certainty of instinct. All the stories about Father Earth being alive are real. But if the mantle is Father Earth's body, why is his silver getting brighter? And she starts to realize that Shafa is having this reaction for very specific reasons. And she's asking, what is the core stone in his head? Where does it come from? And the vehicle tries to answer her question for her. A marvel only available, something route. This vehicle, something heart illuminated, something for your pleasure. So, question. The silver is generated by the core stone that sits lodged in their Sesapine. I It's iron, but like no other iron she's ever sessed. Oddly dense, oddly energetic, oddly alive. Is this a piece of the center of the earth? It's like an action, like, it's almost like they broke the soul of the planet into pieces and inserted it under the skin of these guardians, which makes me question the hunger of these pieces, these core stones. If it generates magic, why does it take magic from her? Is it just, I want it back? You stole it, give it to me? Is it that simple? I'm very unsure that I'm getting what I need to be getting. So she's looking at him as they continue on towards whatever it is they're fucking heading towards. And Shafa is basically completely out. Like, he is screaming, foaming at the mouth, going into basically a seizure, until later he begins to, he starts to claw at his own skin, and then he finally basically breaks and seems to go almost unconscious and staring and drooling, like he has completely lost control of his entire self. There is something just outside the vehicle pressing against the sheath of magic. And here within the sanctum of its heart, the evil earth notices her back. When it speaks, it does not do so in words exactly. She sesses the meanings. Hello, little enemy. This is an approximation, you realize. This is all her young mind can bear. You let him go, she snarls. You let him go right now. The core of the world is metal, molten, and yet crushed into solidity. There is some malleability to it. The surface of the red darkness begins to ripple and change as Nassun watches. Something appears that for an instant she cannot parse. A pattern, a familiar face. It's just a suggestion of a person, eyes and a mouth and a shadow of a nose. But then for just an instant the eyes are distinct in shape, the lips lined and detailed, a mole appearing beneath the eyes, which open. No one she knows, just a face where there should be none. And then, gradually, hundreds of faces begin to appear. And they are all screaming and crying in the way that Shafa is. And it says, all of them ripple with the amusement of a greater presence. He is mine. Not a voice. When the earth speaks, it is not in words. Nevertheless. So Nassun at this point is like, you know what then? Fuck this. And she tries to perform the surgery that she was going to do before to get the piece of core stone out of him. But she's too close to the core now, and it just repairs the connection immediately. And she realizes that every time she tries to cut it away, Shafa's seizure grows a little worse, and that she is just making him suffer even more. Who are these people? Why are they here, churning amid the earth's heart? Obligation. What was stolen or lent must be recompensed. So when she says, who are these people? Is that the spirit of every guardian? Are those the faces that she is seeing? Is it just guardians, or is it just human beings in general? So those who sought to harness magic succeeded. They used the obelisks to do it, and they built wonders beyond imagining. But then they wanted more magic than just what their own lives or the accumulated eons of life and death on the earth's surface could provide. And when they saw how much magic brimmed just beneath the surface, ripe for the taking, it had never occurred to them that so much magic, so much life, might be an indicator of awareness. So where they should have seen a living being, they saw only another thing to exploit. Where they should have asked or left alone, they raped. For some crimes, there is no fitting justice, only reparation. So for every iota of life siphoned from beneath the earth's skin, the earth has dragged 1 million human remnants into its heart. Bodies rot in soil, after all, and soil sits upon tectonic plates. Plates eventually subduct into the fire under the earth's crust, which convect endlessly through the mantle, and there within itself the earth eats everything they were. This is only fair, it reasons, coldly, with an anger that still shudders up from the depths to crack the world's skin and touch off season after season. It's only right. The earth did not start this cycle of hostilities. It did not steal the moon. It did not burrow into anyone else's skin and snatch bits of its still living flesh to keep as trophies and tools. It did not plot to enslave humans in an unending nightmare. It did not start this war, but it will rusting well have its due. And oh, does Nassun not understand this? Her hands tighten in Shafa's shirt, trembling as her hatred wavers. Can she not empathize? Damn. Yeah, so, I was going to end the world. I was going to break the planet into pieces because I just wanted to end it all. I guess I kind of get it. And she looks down, and Shafa is gone limp. He has pissed himself, and she realizes that he has gone and might never come back. And I couldn't believe how, after everything with Shafa, that, broke my heart, And not just on Nassun's part. It's easy to just be like, I just felt bad for Nassun. She finally had somebody who had her back all the time, and now they're gone. But honestly, it's also for Shafa's own sake. Shafa is a slave in his own weird way. And despite the horrific things that he inflicted on other people and the awful system that he was a supporter of, a cog in, there is an enormous amount of his agency that was taken away as well, by whatever this is that's implanted in him. So, yeah, how did this what are the Guardians? How did this happen? I don't know. So she senses that the vehicle is heading back up towards the surface. And I should mention, the reason it even passes through the core of the planet is just for funsies. Because these fucking people who built this just straight up did not understand what they were doing. And they were just like, oh my God, we can totally literally travel through the center of the world. We should totally do that. How crazy would that be? Not understanding that they are basically just figuring a living creature. Yeah. So she says to herself, this has to stop. I will stop it. I promise. She does not know to whom she makes this promise. It doesn't matter, really. Not long after, the vehicle reaches core point. And we're done. It's the end of the chapter. Guys, I am dying. You don't know how hard it was to stop reading here. And I can't believe that I'm using up every minute of my hour and a half. Thank you, Denise. It's appreciated. So, yeah, guys, this is a lot. There is a lot here with the Earth thing, and I am trying to grasp it, but it's such a huge idea, so outside of anything that I have understood about a lot science fiction up until this point, that it's causing me to have to shift my thinking on the whole thing entirely, But yeah, it's fascinating. It's really, really interesting. Everybody is oppressing everybody, even the ones who I don't know, the original, and I can't remember the name of the tribe or the people, Nelia. They seemed to function in concert with Father Earth in a way that, the Sil'ana just never really understood. And maybe that was why they were able to create things that were so efficient and worked so well, because they weren't treating it like a dead thing that they were digging at. They were treating it like it was alive, and that might be the key. I don't know. But yeah, thank you very much to Denise for commissioning this episode. Thank you for Tony for hanging out with me in the chat. And I can't wait to read more of this. I hope that you guys enjoy the coverage, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.